Hi there, this is the start of what may be rather a long list of videos. So I'm trying to, going to read through the Pali Canon, and I thought it might be interesting as an exercise just to keep focused, perhaps to make a video log or vlog or whatever you call it these days of reading through the Pali Canon. So as well as being a record of what I've read, I think that will probably give me an incentive to complete reading the Pali Canon. And the other thought is that as well as reading them, if I can explain what I've read, then that has I have a much better chance of believing I've understood the individual parts of the books. You could say, well, why read the Pali Canon in the first place? Well, an answer to that question is my main introduction to Buddhism has been through the internet and textbooks, and being hit with a plethora of information from all different sources, Western, Asian, American, English, Burmese, Sri Lankan. They all seem to have their own interpretation of Buddhism, and I thought the only way to satisfy myself that what I was hearing was true to what is believed that Buddha has said would be go back to the source, which in the case of the Theravada branch is the Pali Canon, which is composed of several books. The ones which I'm interested in are the Majjhima Nikaya, the Samyutta Nikaya, and the Anguttara Nikaya. They've recently been retranslated by Bhikkhu Bodhi, and so I've got those books, 3 volumes, and will work my way through them, starting with the Majjhima Nikaya. Now, already having just read, say, the first 8 or 9, and sort of come across things like, when you look at the 5 precepts of Buddhism, the first of which is usually quoted as being not to kill, and it just occurred to my mind, well, does that mean you can harm people as long as you don't kill them? Is that the intent of that? And then read in one of the first of the Pali Canons that it's actually do no harm, and looking at the Pali, make sure it's not been a mistranslation of the Pali word being translated is harm, not kill. So that fits better with my moral beliefs anyway. Do no harm, do not kill. And obviously kill is comprised within harm. And similarly, when reading about the Buddha's enlightenment, and that he was gravely tempted by Mara, M-A-R-A, by Mara, to go back to earthly ways, with indulge in sensual desire and such like. And apparently in the whole of the Pali Canon there's no mention of this. It always is been brought up later. So I'm trying to avoid the later interpretations and commentaries, such as those by Buddhaghosa, which were, I believe, written about 500 years after Buddha was around. As I say, I'd rather go back to what I understand as the original and sort of look for myself. I'm quite pleased that part of the Buddha teachings are explore for yourself, don't take other people's word for it. And having said that, the next question tends to be, well, looking at the Pali Canon, is that a true and accurate record? Well, No, it probably isn't, but it's the closest thing we'll get. And nowhere in there, I believe, does it say, we have the phrase Buddha said X, Y, Z. It's more, I have heard, meaning that everybody should understand that it is an interpretation, it's not Buddha's word per se. And the other thought is, well, hang on a minute, this was a verbal knowledge or oral history for about 500 years before it was written down. But I do take, what's the word? Some degree of, well, not content, but satisfaction, I suppose, that the different Buddhist monks used to meet once in a while, and then recite to each other the parts of the Pali Canon that they knew and make corrections thereto. So these councils would go on for months and months and months. I mean, they weren't held often, maybe every 100 years, 150 years, and it wasn't in fact until I believe the fourth council in the century before the Christian era started, that the Pali Canon was committed to writing. And why was it in Pali in the first place? Well, I will understand that Pali was the language of the people rather than Sanskrit, which was the language of the overlords, if you know what I mean. So, looking in my own sort of European context, that's probably like in 1,000 years ago in England, when the folk spoke Anglo-Saxon, and in the castles and privy halls it was French and Latin. So, if you wanted to communicate with the majority of the people, then Anglo-Saxon the way to go, such as in Buddha's time it would have been Pali. And Pali was, I believe, a written language before it was committed to writing for the Pali Canon, but I believe that in the time that it was written down there was some crisis, catastrophe, whether it was famines, wars, pestilence, whatever it may have been, and the number of monks was severely reduced. And there was a concern that there weren't enough to carry on the oral tradition, so they felt they had to commit it to writing. Committed to writing at the time onto palm leaves, and unfortunately none of those have obviously survived to this day. So we are still reliant on partially on the oral tradition and retranscription of the Pali Canon. And what has been retranscribed, does that concur with the original? And again, they tend to check that by looking at what was translated from the Sri Lankan version across into Asia, along into China, and saying, well, hang on, there's something here in the let's say the Sri Lankan version that doesn't occur in the Chinese version, which tends to suggest that the whatever it was an addition to the Sri Lankan version after it was translated across into Chinese. So there's ways of looking at how accurate was it. The oral tradition is as good as the written tradition, because if you look at the civilizations that only had the oral tradition, then that tends to stay very accurate a very long time. So like here in New Zealand with the Maori, who didn't have a written language, have their language in writing, should I say, but wasn't oral tradition. It's only up to a few years back, 50, 100 years or so, that there were folk within the community who could recite the oral history of their particular iwi or tribe, going back hundreds and hundreds of years, and could speak for hours on end, just relating this tradition. So similarly, this was done with the Pali Canon. So I was looking at the 3 books that are available that Bhikkhu Bodhi has translated, the Majjhima Nikaya, the Samyutta Nikaya and Anguttara Nikaya. The Majjhima Nikaya apparently is the most accessible, so that's the one I was starting with. I'm very fortunate because it is a recent translation that Bhikkhu Bodhi actually, as well as the written commentary within the books themselves, he also taught about the Majjhima Nikaya over about a 10-year period, and that course is available on the internet, so I'll provide a link to that on the description of this video. So that just about brings me to my start point, so I'll leave it there, just checking through my notes of what I was going to talk about. So pretty much well covered it, I think. So I'll see how I get on over the next few years. Thanks for watching. Cheers.